This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome to winning season. It is finally here. The finals are just around the corner and we have completed an undefeated AFLW season. A shame, really, that we had that draw in round 2 against Geelong, because aside from that, it's been very, very smooth sailing. An undefeated season, minor premiers, and ready to attack the final series in the coming weeks. It was a bit of a slow start against the Suns. We'll obviously talk about that during this podcast, go through the game, and then, have a little bit of a look ahead to what the finals might look like. Fortunately, against the Suns, we were able to, put the foot down late in that first quarter and then just did what was required. It was actually a very dominant performance in the end. It was just a bit of a slow start, bit of a congested start to the game. We've got away injury-free, so we can essentially book in a qualifying final against the Crows unless something very strange happens today. I'm recording this Sunday morning, so there are still a couple of games left to go in this final round. But it does look as though we'll be playing the Crows. Let's take a closer look at this game against the Suns and unpack the last game. Team selection, and there was some resting. We did choose to rest Jenna Bruton. Eliza Shannon came in, I think, for her second game. I think she's only played one other game. So I think that was probably a good move. Obviously, they're not like for like. Jenna Bruton's more of a forward who can go into the midfield. Eliza Shannon, sort of a medium-sized defender. But we must have shuffled the magnets around to make that work. And I think a good move to get Bruton some rest. It did appear to me as though, from the outside, she hasn't been in her best form in the second part of the year. And that's totally understandable coming off the Achilles injury. You're going to lose a little bit of pace and a little bit of confidence in your body, no doubt. So good to get her a rest before a big qualifying final. And I also think probably good to get Shannon some time. Only the one game this year, so now she's up to 2, got a bit of touch. She did look a little bit off the pace out there. I'll talk about her game in a minute. So I think it was a good idea to get her in, because that's the sort of player that you want available, in finals. If there was an injury or someone finds themselves woefully out of form, you want someone who you can bring in, and Shannon, I think, is that kind of player. So good to get her a game, and we definitely want Jenna Bruton fit and firing for next week. You might have listened to my podcast with Jazzy Garner earlier in the week, but she referenced the fact that Bruton is a renowned finals performer. They talked about her Stewie Dew performance last year. So whilst it hasn't been a massive season for Jenna, I think there's every chance that finals could be her platform, I guess, to just take a step forward. And even if it's not, she is an important player for us structurally and so flexible. We've seen her play that sweeping role in the back line. We know that she can go into the middle if required, and she's been playing a pretty unselfish role in the half-forward line for a lot of the year. So I think both of those made sense. Could we have rested another player or two potentially? But I think we've referenced it several times. It is difficult to, I guess, or maybe not difficult is the right word. It's a bit dangerous to play with form. You don't want to rest half your side, and we know that AFLW squads aren't large enough for you to do that. So we went in mostly unchanged, and the match result, a dominant performance. North Melbourne 11-12-78 did defeat the Gold Coast Suns 2 goals, 3-15, a 63-point win. And I was at the game. It didn't necessarily feel that dominant early on, and I think part of that is because it did take us quite a while to get our first goal on the board. We had several points, and then the Suns actually kicked the first goal. It was just a super congested game. The Suns were throwing a lot of numbers around the ball in that first quarter and also behind the footy, so that did work well in terms of it created repeat stoppages, and they were intercepting quite well at half-back. Katie Lynch was dropping back and taking some good grabs in inside 50. we just weren't quite able to get those deep entries. We were kicking into the breeze-ish. It was a swirly breeze, but it was definitely favouring one end, and you could see that our kicks were holding up in that first quarter. Eventually, though, we were able to, I guess, break their backs a little bit and kick a couple of goals. Sheila, O'Loughlin and Randall scored pretty late in the first quarter. And some of those were a little bit unlucky. We sort of took our opportunities. The Suns spoiled each other in a marking contest, which allowed O'Loughlin to take advantage. Which allowed Sheila to take advantage. And then O'Loughlin, a little while later, took advantage of a short kick in the Suns' defensive 50 that wasn't called 20 metres, and she was able to pounce on that and kick our second. So those two kind of half chances or mistakes, if you will, from the Suns is what created our first two, and then Randall kicked another, and away we went from there. It was certainly never in doubt. I wasn't watching it concerned, but it was just we were a little slow to get off the mark. And then despite the fact that it was a really slow start, it could have ended up being an absolute shellacking. We hit the post 3 times. We did struggle to transition the footy for large parts of the last quarter as well. There was a bit of a scoring drought in that quarter, obviously when the game was sealed, but 63-point winners, and it could have been a lot more. 11 goals, 12. Part of that inaccuracy was that the swirling breeze. It was difficult to read because it was blustery at times as well. It wasn't a consistent breeze. But I mean, if two or three of those points go through for goals, all of a sudden we're looking at an 80-point win, which in the AFLW is, a monstrous win. 63 is still a massive win, but pretty comparable to a couple of our wins from this year. So, a standard win. We absolutely dominated territory in this game. And, although the Suns did kick 2 goals in the first half, which is, probably a little disappointing, just given, that they came in 17th the ladder, we came in first, and a really dominant side. I think we were pretty open to try and play some free-flowing footy, and that a couple of times did allow the Suns to get some transition and use some disposal and get it inside their forward 50. But the inside 50 count I'll talk about in just a minute was completely lopsided. So you'll see from that it was a game that was played in our half of the ground. Honestly, in that last quarter, it just looked like we were coasting. It didn't look like we were too concerned at all, and probably that's partly why we took our foot off the gas a little bit and weren't necessarily scoring as heavily in that final term. And honestly, I think all of us at the game are just, we're sort of thinking, or if you're watching it, let's just get through injury-free at this point. We don't need anyone picking up a late injury in this last quarter, and to my knowledge, that was the case, so that is a win. Let's look at the story of the game, and I alluded to it just before. The inside 50 count really speaks to what happened in this game. It was 51 inside 50s to 15. So a massive differential there. And I think that says what I've been saying. The game was played in our half. Even if it wasn't played directly in our inside 50, it was certainly played, just outside our 50 or just inside it. And that inundation of ball was bound to result in a belting eventually, which it did. I think probably the ironic part is that we looked our best offensively when the Suns did manage to get it forward, and then we were able to go coast to coast once we turned them over and just run and carry the ball. We've seen all year that's when we look our best, when we've got our halfbacks creating that drive and I guess creating opportunities up the ground where there are even contests. But we saw several times our speed and our ability to move their defence around with accurate kicking and hand passing to players moving past meant that our best shots came from that slingshot. Whereas when we were playing from stoppages in our forward half, we just found the congestion a little bit too much to push through at times. And like I said, I think that's a reflection of our preferred game style really, is to just go run, gun, back ourselves in for 1-on-1 or 2v2 contests in our forward half. And I think particularly given the win was a bit swirly, we did a great job of hitting targets when we needed to. We saw several times where either O'Shea or Gatt or even Bresnahan were starting chains pretty deep inside 50, and we were able to just hit target at halfback, navigate our way through the wing, and then go inboard and then try and find a target inside 50. You can see that, we have our strategy seems to be pretty dedicated towards getting it out nice and wide as we're exiting 50. And then as soon as you hit that wing area, we still have players that run wide, but that's when you see the eyes dart inwards and we're looking for those corridor players. And I thought the fast plays that we were able to generate that way were, the best that we looked. And I think that just makes sense because when there's so many players around the ball in congested and contested situations, it can be difficult to, play that free-flowing football that we like to play. So it makes total sense, and that was always going to be the case against a side like the Suns. They were always going to try and junk the game up a little bit. You've seen a lot of sides try to do that to us, and they're generally able to do it for a little while, but then eventually the damn wall breaks, and we saw that happen late in the first quarter. So it didn't take long, whereas there have been some other sides that, it's taken us until late in the second quarter, for example, to pull away a little bit. So yeah, a really, really fantastic win, and, just the same story in terms of the players that are generating that territory wins for us. Like Riddell through the middle was amazing. Garner does just continue to do what she's done all year. Mia King and Tripodi were fantastic in their, I guess, second fiddle midfield roles. I thought it was possibly Mia King's busiest game for the year, and somehow I still haven't been able to find a vote for her, but yeah, those midfielders did a fantastic job of getting the ball into our half, and then, yeah, our forward half players just did the rest. I'll talk about a few of them in a minute, but there really wasn't an area of the ground that I thought didn't contribute to the win. It's always hard to mark those key backs because at times they're just setting up behind the footy and then, maybe having a touch or two a quarter when the ball, happens to head down there. But, they're playing their role, and I think that's all you can ask of them. We know that when we're playing against the better sides, they're going to see more of the footy and they're going to be asked to do a bit more. But yeah, I thought Birch, Ferguson, and then I suppose you could call Sarah Wright a bit of a key tool as well at times. I thought they did a fantastic job when required, and that's what we need. We need a full team performance, and I think for the most part we got that. Let's have a look at the 5 stars. So the last time I'll be giving votes for the home and away season. If you are a new listener, this goes towards the North Podium. So the 4 best North Melbourne players get some votes, and the best opposition player, I note them, and then we tally up the votes to see who ends up on the North Podium. And my girl, Alice O'Loughlin, I had to give the 4 votes for best on ground. She was absolutely manic at ground level and in that forward half. Kicked 4 goals, 14 disposals, 2 marks, 4 tackles, went at 93% disposal, so did not really make a mistake. In fact, the only error she made all day was getting caught holding the ball once. I think we can forgive her for trying to take the game on. That's how she plays. She's going to get caught holding the ball every now and then because she does try to play quite an evasive, aggressive style. Was just a constant threat. Didn't miss either, so 4 goals straight. Was looking dangerous and likely to kick a 5th late, but just wasn't quite able to find that space to create that last goal, which I think 5 would have made it a definite 4-vote game. It was a toss-up for me between O'Loughlin and a couple of others, which I'll talk about, but I still think 4-goal performance for a medium-sized player has to be rewarded with a 3 or a 4 vote. And I thought, yeah, she's back to that early season form that we saw. She was red hot to start the season. She did dip a little bit in the middle part. Not to say that she's been poor, but she's just found it a little bit harder to find the scoreboard probably in the last month or so. But to see her, like I said, kick 4, back to her form. And I think she doesn't actually need a bag of goal when we get less entries. But, she needs a goal or 2, and that really sparks us. I think an Alice O'Loughlin goal is worth a couple in terms of the morale and the boost that it gives us in the confidence that we have in the way that we play. And, yeah, she really did that for us yesterday. Again, I'm talking on Sunday, so that's why I'm referencing yesterday. She was just, a fantastic target and just knows exactly where. She's such a smart forward. She's always running to where the ball is going to end up. Like a good example of that is Kate Shelaw had one of the best goal assists I've ever seen, where she picked up a half volley on the run, gave it quick hands to Alice O'Loughlin, almost in one motion. But the fact that O'Loughlin was there in that moment speaks to the fact that her timing is immaculate. She knew where to be, albeit Shelaw, it was a superwoman effort to get the hands out to her so cleanly. But it was interesting. It was just such a I can't remember if that was her second or her third goal, but either way, the entire side was celebrating before Alice had even kicked it. It was just such a clean hand pass from Sheila, such a great pickup, and then O'Loughlin was able to just walk into a goal. Yeah, she's in fantastic form, which is what we want to see. And like I said, if we are playing the Crows next week, she doesn't need to kick 4 to have this kind of, impact on the game. But if she kicks 2 goals and gets a couple of holding the ball free kicks 4, I think that's a massive, massive win. So Alice O'Loughlin, 4 goals, doing me proud. I've been back. I've been on her all year. I'm on the Alice O'Loughlin bandwagon, and I can't wait to see what she can do come finals time. And then we look to the 3 and the 2 and the 1, and it was a really hard game to give votes for, in part because being at the game, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to, see the whole ground and see what's happening at the other end of the ground. But, I have looked back at some highlights. I think for me, Jazzy Garner's input across the entirety of the game has to be rewarded with the 3 votes. She had 24 disposals, kicked 1 goal, 2. Definitely one of them, and I think maybe even 2 of them hit the post. Certainly one did from a set shot. 7 marks, 9 tackles, 4 clearances, 4 inside 50s. Had 9 score involvements, which was the most on the ground. Like I said, unlucky not to collect a goal or 2 more. And was just immense all day, particularly by hand. I thought she was really good at putting other players into space with forward handballs. Her tackling was really strong. She won 3 free kicks, 4 to go with the rest of her overflowing stats sheet. And yeah, it was a Jazzy Garner game. You kind of know what to expect from her. She's not an outright accumulator. She doesn't really tend to get 30 plus, but she'll get mid-20s. She'll kick a goal or 2. She'll get plenty of clearance inside 50, and she'll tackle. And that's exactly what she did. She did not let the Gold Coast Suns players exit stoppages cleanly at all. And just, like I said, the way that she was able to put other players into space. She's got such great vision and timing with the way that she hand passes the ball. So, yeah, just another Jazzy Garner performance. I think I've said it a few times this year, but sometimes you can just get, I guess, a little bit lulled into. You can mark her a bit harshly, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because you go, oh, well, she just kind of does. She did what she normally does, but what she normally does is quite remarkable. So certainly, if I do hope that she gets rewarded with some votes from the umpires in the AFLW awards this year. I did speak to her about that in my interview with her. I do encourage you to go back and listen to it. It was a great interview. Toot my own horn. It was great to talk to her, is what I'm trying to say. And she says all the right things, that she's not too worried about it, that she just understands that she's playing with a lot of great players, and she worries about the team reward. And I totally get that, but to me, she has to get some reward. Maybe she doesn't win it. It's a tough award to win. Only one. Well, generally speaking, you're only going to have one winner, but I think it would be great to see her actually get some votes and find her way up the leaderboard this year. Anyway, that's probably a conversation for a later date. The 2 votes, her little compatriot in the midfield, Ash Riddell, she does play more of an accumulator role. 32 disposals, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 4 clearances. 426 metres gained, which was the most on the ground. 6 inside 50s, 8 intercepts. And yeah, if you're going to pick someone to fill your stats sheet, it would be Ash Riddell. Was just able to create and generate so much run. She's often the one receiving those handballs on the run to get the metres on the ball. Like I said, 6 inside 50s, so she was one of those players really driving it in there, and then she tends to sit behind a little bit. So the 8 intercepts does speak to the fact that she's often sort of 3/4 of a kick off the contest when the ball does go inside 50. She's often the one that plays that pseudo intercept role where she can read where the opposition side is likely to be dumping it, and often, whilst she's not marking it because they're often ugly kicks, she's in the spot there to try and thrust the ball back in. It's easier to give the midfielders votes, but when they accumulate and damage this much, how can you not? She had such an impact on the game, Riddell, and I think it's just the perfect combination between her and Garner. They play very different games, but complement each other really well. Riddell's often the one receiving those hand passes from Garner. She's much more of a gut runner, Riddell. She doesn't look like she's got fantastic pace. I don't think that she would be the quickest, over 100 meters, but it's the gut running and the capacity to just keep running and to know where to run to. And often that means, like I've mentioned it several times, she is probably the number one hand pass receive player in the side without Emma Carney in the side, because she just knows exactly those angles to run to give herself some space and time to kick it. So 2 votes for Ash Riddell, and then look, I will go through them in a minute. I could have given half the side votes, so it was really tricky. I thought watching it at the ground that Erica O'Shea was fantastic. Had 14 disposals, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 360 metres gained, so not far off Ash Riddell. 6 inside 50s, had 3 1%ers, and just to me was one of several that was really damaging off half back. She had plenty of runs where she just tucked under her hand and off she went. In particular, she was really good at running her distance and kicking it deep inside 50, where there was a couple of others like Neve Martin. I'm going to have a slight go at her. Sometimes she just ran slightly too far and then put herself under pressure with the kick, whereas O'Shea doesn't do that. I think part of that is because she's got such good leg speed that she, good luck catching her. We saw that last week against Adelaide. The Adelaide player thought that she had her covered and O'Shea got her. So, yeah, I thought that she just had a really impactful game off half-back. All of her disposals were, I guess, in space and flashy, so that helps. But I don't think they were flashy for the sake of being flashy. They were flashy and impactful, and I thought she had a really, really good game. Was one of those ones that was involved in those chains that I was talking about where we're going end-to-end and scoring. She was often involved at the back end of those in terms of, getting it started. If she had it off half-back, it was going to a target along the wing, or she was running it halfway and then kicking it inside 50. Like, that's kind of the two situations that she found herself in this game. So, yeah, another fantastic game from Erica O'Shea. I think I've given her 1 vote before. She's just been a really consistent performer this year, I think. And I've seen less of her, I guess, disposing of it too late or with haphazard kicking that I saw at times last year. I think she's really, really matured this year into a smart footballer as opposed to, just a great athlete. And, that's probably diminishing the role that she played last year, to be fair. I guess what I'm trying to say is she's added another string to her bow this year, because I do think she's a bit more intelligent as a footballer and able to find some more space as a footballer this year. So there's my 4-3-2-1, O'Loughlin 4, Garner 3, Riddell 2, O'Shea 1. And like I said, there's just so many that, could have also gotten the votes. Taylor Gatt, I will talk about, but she had one of the best goals of the year, I think. It was a fantastic solo goal that was almost worth a vote just based on that. So I'll talk about her shortly. Mia King, I mentioned her as well. I think it was probably her best or close to her best game for the year. She was superb as that kind of third fiddle in the midfield, had 25 disposals and 8 tackles. A couple of really good runs and kicks inside 50, which, is not necessarily what we see from her. She's quite the bull in the midfield, but it was good to see her getting some time and space as well. And Libby Birch was probably the best of the defenders. Just resolute, had a couple of contested marks, 8 intercepts, and played a fantastic tall defensive role back there. So any of those could have gotten the votes. There's probably a couple of others as well, but I can only find room for 4, so that's the way that it went. In terms of the best opposition player, a pretty tough game to evaluate that for a couple of reasons. In part because I'm at the game, and to be honest, there's not a lot of the Gold Coast players that I recognise, and they just didn't play a good game, to be fair. So I've given the best oppo play to Katie Lynch. She had 13 disposals, 5 marks, 2 of those contested, 5 intercepts, and I think she did her best to repel our attacks before the damn wall broke. I thought, none of our tools had an absolute field day, and that was in part due to her marking and defensive bodywork. She was the one that was able to get some intercepting going early on and, stopping us scoring early on. She did some fantastic work in that space, and I thought, just toiled away all day. It was always going to be a tough game when she's trying to defend 51 inside 50s to 15, but yeah, I thought that she did a pretty good job of that, and like I said, took some important marks. There were some mids for the Suns that toiled away. Rowbottom had 27 disposals and 7 clearances. Whitford had 25 disposals and 6 clearances, but ultimately you have to say that their work wasn't super effective. Ultimately, they weren't able to turn that accumulation into scoreboard impact, so that does hurt them a little bit. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that if we were doing, if we were ranking every player on the ground, you probably need to get down to sort of 8, 9, or 10 before you're listing a Gold Coast player. I would say they were pretty anonymous as a group on the day, and that's what you get from the 17th place side. It's not a slight on them. I think there's one of my tensions with the AFLW is how fast it's expanded, and that's how we end up with these lists that just unfortunately are lacking depth or high quality players. So look, that's probably a separate issue for a separate podcast. I do worry about how fast the AFLW has expanded, but that's why we have some of these really lopsided results, or at least part of the reason, because I just don't think we yet have enough elite AFLW players to fill those spots. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different day. Let's have a look at what the 5-star or the North Podium ranking is looking like ahead of finals. So Jazzy Garner has more or less sewn up that first spot. I guess if we were to have to play 4 finals, there's a chance that she doesn't get up. She's in front by 13 votes. So Jazzy Garner 34, Ash Riddell 21, and then Sheila and O'Loughlin equal third on 11 votes. So there's your kind of group of 4 that is looking like they're the 4 that will finish in the top 3, if that makes sense. One of those will miss out. Behind them, Birch, Randall, and Mayor King all on 5 votes. Gat, Carney, Eddie, Wright on 3, and Tripodi, Craven, and O'Shea on 2. So a lovely spread. How many players do we have there? 14 players across 10 games with some votes. And, there's certainly a couple of players that are pretty unlucky that they haven't voted. I think of Bresnahan. She's probably often been the 5th or 6th best player on the field. Neve Martin's had a couple of games where she's kicked a few goals, so there's definitely a really nice spread. But Jazzy Garner is virtually. Let's hope that she has won it, because that probably means we only have to play 3 finals. Look, I'm talking like as though we're gonna get straight through to the grand final, but you know what I mean. I think we're certainly hoping that we're not going to play 4 finals. So let's put it that way. So Garner, Riddell, Sheila, and O'Loughlin are sitting atop the podium at the moment. In terms of the positives and the negatives for this game, it was an interesting one. I nearly thought of scrapping it all together just because there wasn't a lot of negatives to talk about. And I was going to just call it talking points. But I think what I've got here is some negatives that we can then look at how the positives turned out as a result of it. So let's start with the negatives. And I thought Talia Randall had a really odd game. And you'll see what I'm talking about in terms of the negative to positive here in a minute. She actually finished with 2 goals, 11 disposals, 5 tackles, 2 goal assists. So her impact statistically ended up being really nice. And I thought her first and her last quarters were good. But the middle 2 quarters, she probably struggled for impact a little bit. I wrote a note at the start of the last quarter that she just looked a little bit off, and like as a tall forward, it's not always going to be your day, so nothing wrong with that. I think the positive for me is that she was able to put her stamp on the game, even though it wasn't necessarily going her way. In the 4th quarter, she dropped an absolute soda that would have meant that she was lining up for what would have been her 2nd goal at the time. And I was probably prepared to have a little bit of a chat on the podcast about her form in this game, and sort of like I am saying, talking about the fact that she's a little out of form. But then she kicked a goal late, so that took her to 2, and the 2 goal assists I probably should be giving her credit for, because essentially she's got at least 5 direct score involvements there. She's kicked 2 goals, 1 herself. She's had 2 goal assists. That's direct score involvements. That's putting aside potentially a score involvement where you've been a little bit further up the chain and, less directly responsible for the score. But there was a couple of things that really impressed me in the last quarter as well. There was a moment there where we'd kicked a goal. She was playing the deepest forward, so she was in the goal square, and the ball hadn't been bounced yet. And Vicky Waugh was just wandering towards her in the goal square. I guess maybe potentially Waugh was going to try and lay a bit of a shepherd so that Randall could get some space, but I don't think, or my assumption is that Waugh didn't necessarily know that he couldn't have two players in the goal square when the ball's thrown up. So Randall was essentially pushing, like directly giving her a big shove to get out of the goal square to avoid a free kick. So she was switched on there. And then not long after that, or maybe it was before, but certainly in the same time period, she was calling Gold Coast trainers over from like 60 metres away. I was in my area of the ground where I was standing to try and get her opposition player some medical support. I don't know if she was unwell or if she was a bit injured, but her opposition player did end up going off at that point. So she was all over it. She could do no wrong in that last quarter. As soon as she dropped that mark, she dropped the mark, and all of a sudden she was kicking goals and directing play everywhere. So yeah, she was. I think the positive for me, like I said, was she didn't have a consistent game, but she was able to have a really good impact in the first and the last quarter, and have a couple of goal assists to go with it. So Talia Randall, I'm starting as negative, but I hope you can see there that I've built that into a positive. Libby Birch is a bit of a concern or a watch for me. She does seem to be getting targeted physically. That's something to watch out for in finals, I think. The game that we played against Melbourne, against her old side, there was a really, really big tackle that was laid on her, and there was a bit of talk that potentially she'd broken some ribs or had some internal bruising as a result of that. And there's been a couple of times since then that it's looked as though opposition sides have tried to, I guess, rough her up a little bit as a result of that, or I'm drawing a line between those two things at least. There was 2 occasions in this game where she got absolutely bodied pretty unfairly, I think. The first time she brushed it off, she got on with it because she got a free kick. The second time she earned herself a 50-metre penalty, but she was not happy at all. And you could see that, or I'm inferring there that there was a bit of a targeting from the Suns players, because potentially there's a bit of talk that she's playing sore, and that's a way to either get inside her head or to potentially diminish her impact on the game. I hope that's not what's happening, and I hope if that is the case that she's absolutely fine and it's not going to be a concern come finals. I think finally her knee is looking pretty mobile now. She's certainly looking more mobile than she was at the start of the year. So with her knee being fit, I hope that we're not going to see some issues with her, her torso in terms of rib or anything like that, because she's been a super, super important player. I know that when we recruited her, I guess I heard some talk that potentially she wasn't that effective as a defender, that she's played in a good system and that kind of thing. She's been phenomenal. She's made fantastic contributions. She's allowed Sarah Wright to play with more freedom. And yeah, the Birch Ferguson combination in terms of, taking out those key tools for the opposition team has been just an absolute dream. So I think potentially, something that we lacked when we got beaten by Brisbane in that grand final last year was someone that could compete in the air with Dakota Davidson. Now, that's a really, really tough thing to do, to be fair, but I think Birch has the capacity to at least compete. So if we did have to play Brisbane in a big final, which there's every chance that we will in either a grand final or a prelim, just based on, what the fixture looks like at the moment, I think Libby Birch and Jazz Ferguson, I think they're a chance to be able to compete and stifle someone like Dakota Davidson's impact. And that's what we brought Birch across for. So hopefully her body is okay and it's just, a bit of a coincidence, but I think that is one to watch to see if she's being targeted physically a little bit, because there's a perception that she's playing sore. And then the other negative, I mean, it was positive that we're able to get Eliza Shannon into the game. You want to give her some fitness and give her a chance to see the pace of the game, but she did look a yard off the pace. She got caught holding the ball once and was probably a little slow to dispose of it a couple of times. So I think that's why you want to get her in. I thought she was reading the ball really well in the air, which were hard to do given the breeze was so swirly. She had 5 marks and 4 intercepts. So I think finding the ball and positioning herself was absolutely fine. It was just the pace of the game that, she probably needed to adjust to a little bit. She just invited pressure a little bit, and sometimes, that meant that her disposals didn't necessarily get the reward. So if she's needed in finals, I think she's ready. I think that's what was important about this game. She's played a couple of games this year. She's played one in the last round. So if for whatever reason she's required, I do think that she's ready now, and she'll understand better the pace that she's required to play at. But yeah, she probably didn't have a great game with disposal is what I'm trying to get at there. Found the footy well, but wasn't able to be super effective in that way. But look, she's given Jenna Bruton a rest, and she's ready for finals. So it's not a major concern. And I think that's probably what I want to touch on with those, all 3 of those negatives. They're those little 5%ers that you worry about. So Randall, I thought, in the second and third quarter she just looked 5% off. Libby Birch potentially being injured maybe makes her 5% off in the contest. And Shannon, hopefully we don't have to worry about it at all because, we're not requiring her to play, which, is tough, but if we're fully fit, I just don't think she's playing, given Emma Carney will hopefully be back for the second final whenever we happen to play our second final. So there's the negatives. Let's move on to the positives, and it's hard. I mentioned it before in the 5 stars. Taylor Gatt kicked one of the best goals in the AFLW I've seen. It was a start of the third quarter. She picked up a loose ball pretty much directly in front of me in the back pocket. She kicked it out to Vicky Wall in a contest. It wasn't marked. It was a ground level contest. Vicky Wall won it. I think it was a 2-on-1. She then gives the hand pass back to Taylor Gatt, who continued running. She kicked long down the wing and hit Kate Sheelaw, who took a mark. She hand passes to, sounds like I'm commentating the game, doesn't it? She hand passed it to O'Loughlin, who kicked it inside 50. During that, or whilst that's happening, Taylor Gatt's continued running. She's burnt off any opposition players that were with her at that time. A bit of a loose ball inside 50. Neve Martin gets a hand onto it. The opposition players get a boot to it. It ends up sort of spilling to Taylor Gatt, who's in the forward pocket. So she's gone from the back pocket to the forward pocket, essentially kept up with the pace of the ball. She looked spent, so it was a big run. She picked up the ball, was tackled, and was able to sort of semi-evade. She kind of ducked under the tackle a little bit so that she had her leg and her body free a bit. She just threw it on the boot. Like I said, forward pocket, quite the angle, and the ball dribbled past several players, or a bounced past, because it wasn't dribbling, it bounced past. Got a couple of lucky bounces, don't get me wrong, but bounced past several players for a goal. Just a massive effort. I do encourage you to go and watch the video just to get full appreciation for it. But she had 3 involvements, the 2 kicks to drive it up the ground, and then the kick in the forward pocket. An amazing goal. The highlight of the game for sure. And I certainly hope it gets a Goal of the Year nomination. I think, to be honest, that the way that if you just put aside the 2 disposals that she had in the build-up, the goal that she kicked is worth the nomination anyway, just because she was under so much pressure. She was tucked up on the boundary line and somehow snuck it through. But when you take into the account that she's had 2 disposals in the build-up to it and ran the length of the ground, just absolutely amazing. That's what you want from your gun wings. A huge effort, and she's had such fantastic development this year. I think that's one of the areas that's probably underrated in our side is how strong our wings are. We've got players. Jenna Bruton can play on a wing, but when you've got Taylor Gatt, Tess Craven, Amy Smith, and at times Neve Martin, who can all play that wing role really effectively, and then you've got someone like O'Shea who could press up and play that role if you needed her to, we're in a really good spot with our wings. So yeah, like I said, go and watch the goal. It was phenomenal. Such an amazing gut running goal, and yes, super impressed with Taylor Gatt's goal there. I just thought I'm going to try and do this fast, because often I say I'm going to whip through things and then it takes me a while. I just want to whip through a couple of those players that I haven't necessarily mentioned from this game, because I think everyone has a role to play, had a role to play. So and I think played that pretty well in this game. Bresnahan did her usual rebounding and defending without fuss. She had 13 touches, 5 intercepts, 85% disposal effectiveness. So a pretty mistake-free game. And, I think her second half of the year has been better than the first. I think she's in some good form at the right time of the year. So she had a fantastic game. Tess Craven, I mentioned, 327 metres gained. She found plenty of the footy. She was getting metres on it. And, on the other side of the ground, often to Taylor Gatt, but doing exactly what she needs to do on that wing. Bella Eddy is one that's probably been a little bit more quiet lately. She had a really good goal assists, but probably wasn't able to, get involved with disposals and accumulate like she has been able to. Didn't kick a goal, and probably has been slightly out of form in the second part of the year. We know that she reads it really well off the pack. If anything, I think she's going to get better when we've got more of those forward 50 contests. We marked it inside 59 times yesterday, and I think probably if we're marking a little less, that's going to bring her into the game. So, it's not about her individually, it's about the team. So if she's crumbing it or in the right spot to crumb it, but we're marking it, that's no big deal. But she probably did have a quiet game by her standards. Jazzy Ferguson just got it done. I did kind of mention her. She just made it really hard to score against her, and she sees so little of the footy, it can be really easy to, mark her. Well, it's hard to mark her really high because she's just not getting a lot of the footy. She didn't go for a break on the bench at all, spent 100% game time on the field. She was, doing some transitioning and switching when required by foot, but wasn't required much yesterday. Emma King was fantastic in the ruck and forward. She has been in goal-kicking form lately, marking it strongly, had 5 marks and a goal yesterday, so I thought her ruck work was fantastic, and we know that she is super dangerous when she goes forward. I think Neve Martin gets better as the game goes on because her tank is so strong. She does a great job at swapping between that half forward and wing role, and she's able to, her flexibility gives several players a chop out, and she's able to find some space, often later in quarters or later in the game, because she's got such a great tank that she can run ahead and find space. So she was, again, not a super high accumulating game, but often when she's getting the ball, she's in space and she's able to do something with it. Kim Rennie just does what she does in the ruck. She's a workhorse. She's really beaten. That's what we need. When Emma King is forward or on the bench, we know that Rennie's going to come in and absolutely hold up her end of the bargain, and she did that as well. Kate Sheilaw's probably pretty unlucky. I haven't mentioned her. She finished with 1 goal, 2, a goal assist, 13 disposals, just continued to find space out the back. She's doing that for fun at the moment, and that gait is just something to behold. She just looks so fast. It kind of reminds me of Majak Dawes' gait in terms of those long legs. Just she doesn't look like she's moving quickly, but she is, if that makes sense. I guess the 2 points is probably what cost her from potentially pushing up into the votes for today, but an amazing game again, nothing wrong with the way that she was playing. So she's in some fantastic form as well. Really good form, in fact. We know that she's leading our goal kicking this year, and she's in some fantastic form. Amy Smith, I mentioned her with the wings. Similar to Rennie, it's just kind of set and forget on the wing for her. Not a flashy game winner, but when the game is on the line or when she's required to put in, like she was against the Crows last week, she does it. She does the dirty things. She smothers, she tackles, she holds her shape on the field so that the structures don't fall apart. And that's what she did yesterday. She's not an accumulator, but she plays their role, and you need those players that aren't necessarily finding the ball 25 times, but are able to be in the right spots when they need to be, I suppose. Ruby Tripodi just keeps hitting career highlights, 19 disposals, 6 tackles, 4 clearances, and to be honest, is really only being held back from playing better or finding more of the footy by the fact that she's the 4th in line there in the midfield. She's behind 3 really, really strong midfielders. So when she is playing 80 or 85% of game time, watch out. She tends to play high 60%. And I don't think that's, much to do with her tank. I'm sure part of it is that she needs to build up her tank. But it's just the fact that you can't play 4 midfielders in the midfield at the same time is the big problem. And if you want to be playing Garner and Riddell and Mia King, then there's not really a spot for Tripodi. So, yeah, she was fantastic when she was out there. She's got a great kick on her, and I think potentially find space better than some of our other mids because so much of the attention from the opposition is going towards them. So nothing wrong with the way that she was playing. Vicky Wall kicked a goal and was, typically she's quiet on the stat sheet, but her impact when she does, get around the footy is high. She won some good 1v1s or even 1v2s, like I mentioned in that Taylor Gadd example, and she is just so strong through the hips. She's so strong with her ability to just push off players and tackle players, and she's such an intimidating player in that forward line. If you're an opposition player, you'd want to be avoiding her for sure. And then the last player I haven't really mentioned in this game, Sarah Wright, I thought just did her intercepting and her rebounding like she does every week at the moment. I'm just loving the freedom that she's able to play with at the moment. At times, it seems as though she's not really opposed to a player because her opposition is pushing up to clog and try and create repeat stoppage and put some pressure on. But I think the fact that she's actually being dangerous in that free role is important. She's not just waiting for her player to come back. I think she's putting herself in some dangerous spots to intercept so that she's able to then, repel anything that's coming her way and end up launching those scoring chains. So, yeah, another solid game from her. Her intercepting was fantastic, and I think... I guess hopefully going through that the whole side there gives you an idea of the fact that everyone's doing what they need to do at the moment, which is what we need. I think linking with that, the last positive thing that I'll talk about, there's just absolutely no sign of ego creeping into our game, which I think is the thing that's so impressive. Several really unselfish plays in this game. Garner had a 1-2 with Randall where really either of them could have finished the goal. Garner ended up kicking it after a 1-2 hand pass. They're just consistently looking for targets inside 50 rather than bombing it. They're always looking for the player in the best position. And I think that part of that is, I mentioned it earlier on, there's a lot of unrewarded running that goes on, but you get the sense that they understand, how that works. It's so often you'll see we're moving up from halfback onto the wing and the players will push quite wide with their leads, which opens up space in the middle of the ground for those players that are running through the corridor. And those players that are running wide are doing their job. They don't get the ball there. It's a pretty, thankless job doing that kind of leading, but ultimately I would know, and I'm sure, internally that's being rewarded because it's that unrewarded running wide that creates that space and allows us to play the corridor game that we want to. And then if the opposition side is going to clog the corridor to stop us, you've got free players running wide for you. So either way, it works for us. It's always those wings and those half forwards doing that running. We've got really, really fit wings and half forwards that are able to get up and back and create that space. So yeah, it's fantastic to be watching a side that's just so confident but egoless and so excited to be playing for each other. And that's the kind of team that you need playing for each other in finals. So perfectly set up for a tilt at the finals. It's so exciting to be watching a legitimately good AFLW football team. With this massive win, we've got our percentage back over 300, which is where it needs to be. It was very disappointing having it a tick under 300 after a disappointing win, so to speak, against the Crows. Didn't win by enough. So yeah, going into finals with that percentage and with the way that we're playing, it's hard not to feel confident. That's for sure. So speaking of, I have gone probably longer than I thought, but there was just so many positives to talk about, given we're heading into finals. Like I mentioned off the top, it looks as though we're going to be playing the Crows. Potentially it could be Brisbane if some weird things happened today. As I said, I'm recording Sunday morning, but most likely we'll be playing the Crows at home as in a qualifying final. I would certainly expect that it's not going to be Friday because that would give us a 6-day break into the final. So I'd expect it to be a Saturday or a Sunday game, but I guess we'll wait and see. The AFL does do some strange things. You would think that that Jenna Bruton's going to come back in for Eliza Shannon. You'd think that's the only change that we make, unless we did want another really capable intercept marker in Eliza Shannon, potentially. But then who are you dropping? Like who's coming out to make that happen? Like Neve Martin and Vicky Wall and Bella Eddy are probably the players that statistically find the ball the least and potentially are more quiet players, but they've got such important role players. So I just don't know who you'd be taking out. I think logically it's Bruton in and Shannon out, and we back our structures, we back our defenders to do what they need to do, but I guess we'll wait and see there. Yeah, hopefully we're able to play a little bit more clinically against the Crows and not let them back in a little bit like we did last week. Hopefully at home we're able to do that and play our structures a bit better. It was a comfortable but not a completely relaxing win against the Crows last week. So they're a really good side. There's definitely a chance that they get us, so to speak, because we are. It's harder to be the hunted. I think we've been the hunted all season. We've matched every challenge so far. I mean, you could say, I suppose, that draw against the Cats was probably before everyone realised just how good we are. Even despite the fact that we absolutely belted the Lions in that grand final rematch, I think round 2 was that Geelong win, or draw rather. So past that, we've just matched every single challenge, and I think there's no reason to think that we won't match this challenge. Marinov is obviously the opposition player that you'd want to be shutting down. I think we shut down her impact quite well last week, so you probably look to do that again. And the fact that you've played them recently, I think works from the perspective of you've got some really recent data around what works and what doesn't. Hopefully we can see a couple of adaptations. Hopefully it doesn't rain. I think now that we're heading pretty quickly towards summer, we're probably more likely to have a hot day than we are to have some rain. But I think we want some clear weather because we will play better football in the clear weather. It's not to say that I don't think we can win in the wet, because we've shown this year that we can, but I think we'd certainly prefer to be playing them in some nicer, calmer, clear conditions. So I think that's probably going to do it for the AFLW talk. I am looking to do a podcast soon looking at the AFL men's. There's been plenty of news in that space recently, so I want to cover that off and look ahead to the draft, that kind of thing. So you can expect that probably this week, and certainly not, if it's not this week, it will be next week. But yeah, plenty still to come on NorthPod. Really appreciate all my listeners. Really appreciate you for listening. It's a fantastic community of listeners we have here at NorthPod, and I appreciate everyone who listens. So thank you so much. That is going to do it for the podcast, though. Super exciting stuff to be in the qualifying final. Looking forward to getting along and supporting the girls and watching another win, hopefully, fingers crossed. And let's lap up having a side in finals, because we know it's been a while for the men, and these girls just keep doing it for us. So yeah, have a great week, and I will speak to you soon. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of NorthPod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X, or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.